So my presentation is called All or None, Banners, Work, Archives, Identity, and Protest. And I guess I want to start by being a little self-deprecating. I'm a museum worker and an artist. I'm not an academic. A lot of this work was really situated in the workplace. It's work that I did as someone who's a museum worker. Not an academic. I actually only have a bachelor's degree. Wah, wah. So it's really exciting for me to be here to present on my day job and some of the work that I did within the context of WAC, which is a very humble community museum that is small but mighty and does some incredible work that really isn't done in many other places in Canada. So yeah, I'm just really grateful to be here. So again, today I'm grateful for the opportunity to share what I've learned through my engagement with a series of garment union banners from the permanent collection of the Community Museum I've worked at for the last 5 years. Much of my research and programming discussed in this presentation was delivered as part of my role as programmer at the Workers' Arts and Heritage Centre in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada's only labour history museum and multidisciplinary arts centre. WAC was conceived in the late 1980s by a group of labour historians, artists, union and community activists who were committed to creating a place where workers' history could be celebrated. In 1996, WAC purchased the Custom House, which is pictured there. It's an incredible building, a historic building situated in Hamilton's North End, a former industrial neighborhood that is now rapidly gentrifying. As program and exhibition specialist, I'm tasked with developing and delivering public programs to individuals and groups, including families, unions, students, artists, and the general public. Over any given exhibition season, the museum leads programs allowing the public to deeper engage with the ideas embedded in the main gallery exhibition. These programs typically include anything from screenings to workshops to talks to tours and outreach programs. So you'll see on the slide a sampling of some photos from programs that we've done over the last year or two. I'll just talk very briefly about them. So the top left was a panel discussion that was part of a really amazing exhibition by a curator named Suzanne Cart. It was a group exhibition called Division of Labor, and it looked at artistic labor and arts work, as well as cultural waste. So all of the waste that's produced by the culture industry, whether it be galleries and museums or the theater industry, and a group of artists. I think there were 4 or 5 artists who created work from basically all the garbage that we have collected over the years as a museum. So they culled a lot of things from our 3rd floor attic, ancient exhibitions from, not quite ancient, like 20 years ago, and created new work, commenting on their labor as artists and workers. On the top right, and something else about that was a panel discussion that was not with the artists, but with arts workers who are doing critical work looking at artistic labor today. So in the picture you see Sally Lee, who's the former managing director of Carfax, Ontario, Michael Miranda, who is assistant curator at the Art Gallery of York University, and Suzanne Cart was also an assistant curator at Art Gallery of York University, but now she is in my region, which is great, at the Art Gallery of Burlington, doing some incredible work around just some incredible critical curatorial projects that have been really fantastic for our region. And then on the far right with the Mac computer is someone named Angela Orsach, who recently coordinated something called the Gage Symposium, which was a weekend-long symposium about art and gentrification in Hamilton. On the top right, you have a paper-making workshop that was led by members of the Quentin Bayan Collective. The Quentin Bayan Collective is comprised of two individuals named Althea Balmez and Joe Simalea Alcampo. And they created a project for us where they did an exhibition about Filipino care workers in Canada and their history, but also their experiences today. And they did a really wonderful program, a 3-part program, where they produced workshops that were geared towards caregivers and their families. So we would have caregivers and their families come out and just enjoy themselves. A lot of care workers work, around the clock, doing not just physical labor in service of Canadian families, but also an incredible amount of emotional labor. Part of the work of WAC is we're not just interested in unionized work. I think when WAC began, that was a big part of WAC's interest, was honoring unions and the purpose of unions in Canadian society, which is, of course, really noble work. But there are so many other kinds of labor. Obviously, ununionized work is on the rise, and also migrant work. And, of course, this is a form of migrant work. On the bottom right is a PA Day camp with local artist named TJ Charlton. And he's doing stop motion animation using archival images of workers with children within the context of a camp day. And on the bottom left is a piece of promotional material for Punching the Clock, Working to Wrestle in Hamilton. It was a show that I curated with art and design by someone named Dave Couric, who's actually a small business owner and artist in Hamilton, but he's also, just an amazing thinker and amateur local historian. So what that show looked at is it looked at the history of industry in Hamilton. Obviously, for those of you who know anything about Hamilton, one of the first things that people think about is the steel industry. Hamilton was and still is, to an extent, a steel town. So what that show looked at is it looked at how in the mid-20th century, a lot of folks who would have been on the fast track to the steel mills as young, mostly men, would have escaped that through trying to wrestle. And there's a huge culture of wrestling in Hamilton. People really love wrestling. I love wrestling. A lot of my friends love wrestling. And we thought that it would be an amazing opportunity to talk about sport as labor. So again, thinking outside the box of what work can be, art is work, sport is work. Art and sport actually carry a lot of similarities in that they are thought of as sort of a luxurious kind of calling for people, but really you're mortgaging your bodies when you're an athlete. You're mortgaging your body to entertain people and to, in a lot of cases, make a living. So that was something that we were interested in exploring through an exhibition as well as a huge host of awesome public programs. We had a wrestling match in the gallery. It was great. So in the winter of 2017, WAC was both blessed and cursed to be short a main gallery exhibition. In the months leading up to this exhibition, it occurred to us that an exhibition featuring our rare banner collection, which had gone unexhibited up until this point, would be an incredible opportunity. The premise of the resulting exhibition, titled All or None, was based on the idea of the structure and strength of textile as a metaphor for community, care, and collectivity. The exhibition focused on the iconography and use of a selection of garment union banners from our permanent collection as vehicles of communication, celebration, affiliation, and resistance. The exhibition also looked at the history of the unions and locals represented, using the images, materials, and text on each banner as clues to a broader visual culture of labor, as very little scholarship about the Canadian labor movement artifacts exist. There's a lot of scholarship about the labor movement, of course, but the material culture of labor, wow, like there really is not a lot, folks, believe me. So the talk that I'm delivering explores the histories and stories behind a small selection of banners from garment workers, union locals in Canada, and the unions and workers who decades ago fueled garment manufacturing in Canada and beyond. The banners commemorate a hidden history of collective action and organizing in a sector dominated by immigrants and women, and contain meaning about their production, design, and alteration over time. This talk will also look at the ways that banners have been integrated into museum programming at WAC, and how the legacy of early 20th century union banners and archives can be found in the work of contemporary artists and artist activists today. While the potential of labor artifacts to inspire and inform is significant, information is scarce about these materials in Canada, at least compared to the USA, Australia, and England. American websites like laborarts.org, archives like the Kiel Center for Labor Relations at Cornell University, and the multiple museums and cultural spaces in England that base their mandates on people's history, social movements, and labor history, place emphasis on preserving the material history of working class life in ways that simply don't seem to happen here. The BC Labour Heritage Centre, and to a lesser extent WAC, typically place more emphasis on the immaterial histories of working people. So they focus on stories, locations of interest, and gains made through labor struggles more than they do the art and objects of the movement. But that's not to say that these objects don't exist. Something I just, this slide was a late addition last night. I was like, I have to talk about George Tuttle. I know I want to focus on Canada, but these banners are just too great for you not to see. These banners on the slide are actually really interesting. They're by a firm, a banner and regalia making firm called George Tuttle Limited. George Tuttle was the owner, and they were really, really active in the late 19th and early 20th century. And these banners are really emblematic of the style of banners that existed in England at that time. And banner makers now in England are still really inspired by these designs that have a sort of a painted central medallion. They usually have a really incredible kind of banner, sort of banner within a banner at the top, honoring either a key statement or a union, a labor union or a trade union. And the banners are typically very narrative. So they'll either have sort of allegorical imagery or more literal imagery of the workers in the industry that the banner represents. For those of you who are interested in trade union banners, specifically European or anywhere, any trade union banners, I would highly recommend that you check out the website of the People's History Museum in Manchester. I've never been there myself. It's a total dream for me to go there. I really want to go there. They have an amazing collection of banners, and they also have an in-house conservation lab. So they've really been at the forefront at doing some really important work conserving trade union banners. Something worth mentioning about George Tuttle is his banners made at his firm were incredibly well made. They were professionally made, so that's part of why so many of them exist to this day, is because they were so well made. And their firm would have included people who construct the banners, but also people who do that incredible painted work. And these are some early promotional materials from that firm. While American and British sources have been key in giving me a broad understanding of some of the symbols and materials used to create historic banners, one of precious few sources of information on materials of this country's labor movement I came across was an article written by OCADU professor Rosemary Donegan in the late 80s called Iconography of Labor. Her insights about imagery on Canadian banners could be applied to labor banners across the Western world. In the 19th century, as I mentioned, many banners tied to professions were narrative, decorative, and employed the use of universal symbols and stories that could be widely understood by working class folks. A particularly amazing example from this country is this Clothier and Tailors Union banner, which actually belongs to the New Brunswick Museum in St. John. The banner is painted with a nude Adam and Eve being expelled through the Garden of Eden. This biblical image was apparently popular for the earliest tailors' unions because their state of undress succinctly shows the need for clothes. In the 20th century, opulent banners, often made by unionized workers, deemed to have artistic skill within their workplace, were adorned with paint, applique and embroidery, metal trims, and they were mostly made of silk. These were less visually narrative as literacy increased among working people. They were made of materials that exuded respectability, ceremony, and dignity. Eventually, text related to a particular trade was to give way to use of union logos with little to no literal visual markers connecting it to an industry. In this sense, labor union flags and swag of today is branded in a way that's pure design. And as Donegan relates, CUPE, CN Rail, and TD Canada Trust, they all kind of blend together in a contemporary landscape of logo design, which is kind of a shame, but maybe that's just me. This complicates readings of labor union banners, which, while born out of a collective radical spirit, almost feel kind of conformist in their material and graphic uniformity and neutrality of sentiment these days. In the mid-20th century, this was likely a deliberate move, in part as a result of unions looking to shed associations with communism, especially moving towards the Cold War years, where there would have been a lot of hostility towards that. The majority of wax banners come from this 20th century period. These banners came to us through a donation from the Union of Needle Trades, Industrial and Textile Employees Ontario Council, or UNITE, in 2003. Spanning nearly 100 years, they traced the history of garment and textile unions in Canada, back from UNITE all the way to all the previous garment unions that merged to eventually become UNITE. Once we decided to show the banners in the context of this exhibition, we knew that scant resources as a very small community museum prevented any conservation efforts related to the banners that were in bad condition. Many of the silk ones had deteriorated, so we knew that we were limited to pretty much displaying the only ones that had, only the ones that had very little wear or damage. In retrospect, it would have been really a really interesting challenge to find a way of displaying the tattered banners as a way of emphasizing both the fact that they were made to be used, but also the endangerment of this particular type of artifact. After selecting what banners could be hung safely, each banner needed to be carefully prepared for hanging. Because WAC is a small community museum, how many times have I said that already? Very, very, very small. Preparing the banners was a role I had to take on myself. It's the DIY spirit. It's really important when you lack resources as a tiny place. While this is a ton of work, I have to say it was an incredible experience, and that the prep work served as a kind of echo of the work done by both the banner makers and the industry honored through the banners. I consulted with my former colleague, Hilary Anderson, at the Textile Museum of Canada, where I used to work as a curatorial assistant a while ago, who advised on the proper way to hang the historic tapestries according to federal guidelines by attaching muslin and Velcro to the top of the banners using a careful running stitch and then attaching them to an armature screwed to the wall. And when I say an armature, I just mean like a 1x4 or 2x4. As I did the prep work, I continued to conduct research. This process allowed me to gradually piece together nearly a century-long narrative of garment workers in Canada, connecting gendered work, immigration, factory closures, technological change, campaigns, trade deals, and union mergers in the age of offshore labor. So the following images will run through each of the banners in the exhibition one by one. It was a pretty small show, so there aren't that many banners to show, maybe 6 or 7. It seems appropriate to begin with this elaborate early banner from the 19-teens, which is the earliest in wax collection. It represents the Journeyman Tailors Union of America, or the JTUA, which is a union of skilled workers who were behind some of the first significant steps towards union organizing in the clothing industry. Tailors' unions were typically small, as most tailors in the late 19th and early 20th centuries remained outside of the union movement. In 1903, less than 18% of the estimated 900 garment workers in Toronto belonged to this union, and only a very tiny portion of them were women. Fewer women were recruited because union membership carried a greater financial benefit for men. The difference between union and non-union wages for women was only 15%, while there are reports of the difference being as much as 50% for men. Part of the work of this union was attempting to abolish sweatshop conditions. This banner uses symbols such as the maple leaf and shaking hands, emphasizing citizenship, solidarity, conciliation, agreement, and strength and unity, and is a flamboyant testament to the superior skill of the workers who had a hand in making it. Like the use of the eagle and American Union banners from this period, the maple leaf shows that organized labor was invested in overt expressions of patriotism and nation building. The shaking hands motif was adopted in banners produced for unions of other sectors in the decades to come. This banner represents the period before banners became devoid of such rich, beautiful imagery in favor of logos, words, and framing devices like scrolls. The International Ladies Garment Workers Union, represented by the banner on the left of this slide, was an iconic industrial union known for their progressive activities and a lot of early strike actions. Into the 20th century, the ILG worked to improve both working and living conditions for its members through collective bargaining agreements, training programs, health facilities, cooperative housing, educational opportunities, and recreational initiatives. Known as a union of immigrants, the ILG established important programs providing assistance and counseling for immigrants and conducting classes designed to help them cope with the challenges of living in a new country. The ILG was also one of few unions in the labor movement that maintained a consistent policy in support of undocumented workers. Over many decades, the union published broadsheets in the languages of the members, like this Yiddish one from Toronto, celebrating the inauguration of the 40-hour work week. So this banner is one of several similar banners in Wax collection, all from about the same time period, using the same materials and same process of creation, but representing different union locals. Because the banners are made of silk, they have been really very vulnerable to deterioration over time, made worse by the fact that their decoration with an oil-based paint has made them difficult to store properly, and they've been very prone to cracking. Like many of the oldest banners in Wax collection, this one is identically painted on both sides, possibly by a regalia maker or possibly a sign painter. The official formation of the Amalgamated Clothing Workers of America took place in 1914 after the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, a notorious industrial disaster in New York City, killed 123 women and 23 men. Most of the victims of the fire were female garment workers of Italian and Jewish descent. Before 1916, female workers were not unionized and had little to no workplace protections. The formation of the ACWA took place at a time when women were gaining greater political freedom, including the right to vote in Canada in 1921. By the 1920s, ACWA was one of the largest men's clothing unions in the United States and Canada, with several Italian, English, and Yiddish-speaking locals. At this time, ACWA was responsible for manufacturing close to 85% of all men's garments made in the United States. However, when the Great Depression hit in the 1930s, ACWA's union membership faltered. So around the time that this banner was made, ACWA's membership was primarily male. Women represented only about 15% of ACWA's membership in the early 20th century. As the Depression neared, dual income families became more common out of necessity, and female involvement in the union movement began to increase. Women workers didn't always have the support of the trade union movement. While early trade unionists were interested in protecting all workers, including women, some feared the competition from so-called unskilled female laborers who worked for lower pay. I'm not sure how clear it is on this slide. This is a picture that I took really quickly right before I jumped on the plane. But one noticeable feature of this particular banner is a visible modification of it, which actually allowed us to date it more accurately. After 1940, this union's affiliation with the American Federation of Labor would have changed after the formation of the Canadian Congress of Labor in 1940. While this banner was likely produced in the 1930s, the stitching was carefully torn out and replaced with new letters after the formation of the CCFL, illustrating the unique ability of these banners to mark changes to labor organizations and affiliation over time through the way that the textiles have been modified to reflect them, because they leave this kind of incredible shadow of the alteration as additional content for the viewer. So while the majority of our banners are from Toronto unions, this one represents workers at a rayon factory in Cornwall, one of Canada's major centers for textile production in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. The town's identity was tied to the cotton mills that lined the Cornwall Canal, most of which were shuttered in the late 50s and early 60s. In the 19th century, large numbers of French-speaking Catholic Quebecois came to Cornwall to work in the vital cotton processing industry, as did experienced textile workers from New England. By the 20th century, immigrants from Italy, Hungary, Germany, Poland, Japan, and the Netherlands, people of Jewish descent, and Mohawk all formed the textile industry's multi-ethnic workforce. Women represented more than half of the workforce at cotton mills during the pre-Depression years. And while these numbers decreased during the Depression due to automation and the privileging of male workers, women filled higher paid jobs that were traditionally the domain of men during the war years. A period of growth occurred in Cornwall in the 1920s when British-owned Courtauld Canada Incorporated opened a rayon manufacturing plant, which was established in 1924 and operated until 1992. Cornwall's Textile Workers Union of America, Local 799, was made up of rayon workers. This banner made of rayon, which is also known, or this banner, the banner that you just saw, known as, was made of rayon, which is also known as fake silk, reflects the union workers that it represents. The 1959 ILGWU union label was officially launched after it was mandatory in the dress industry in 1956. These labels not only indicated to customers that a garment was union made, but also used a system code of letters and serial numbers to easily identify the employers involved in the garment's manufacture. In the 1970s, the use of the union label became re-emphasized during a steep increase in imported goods on both American and Canadian markets. TV ads encouraging the public to look for the union label were associated with working and manufacturing conditions that were beneficial to the worker, the economy, and the country. This small banner, which I actually was just joking about wishing that I could just throw in my suitcase to show everyone because it's actually pretty resilient, it's in good condition, and it's made of synthetic fabric. It's not in any immediate risk. I wish I could have brought it here to show you. I really love it. It presents a Canadian take on the ILGWU's label campaign, displaying bilingual text and a connection to the CLC. This banner was likely produced in Quebec in the 1960s, which was a period of growth in the Canadian apparel industry, specifically in Quebec, and increased use of the union label. One of the most notable aspects of this banner is that it's one of the earliest in our collection that was screen printed onto synthetic fabric. This change represents and foreshadows one of the ways that protest materials and banners are created today. Screen printing remains a favorite way of creating placards, banners, and wearable items for contemporary artists and activists. So with this flag, we come full circle back to Unite, which is the union behind our donation of banners. They were formed in 1995 through a merger of the Amalgamated Clothing and Textile Workers Union and the ILGWU. It's worth mentioning that since this flag was made, Unite has tons of mergers in the labor movement, with another union to become Unite Here, which is a joint union between textile and hotel and hospitality workers. A cornerstone of their activity as a union is organizing workers in lower wage industries and advocating for making them part of the middle class. This flag was digitally printed, reflecting a shift of unions away from the kind of one-of-a-kind or limited-run banners that you saw previously, and towards mass-produced swag distributed to many members of a union for increased parade visibility, a way to create a visual mass, ironically, as the number of unionized workers, specifically in these industries, continues to fall. Each of these artifacts represents a time and a place and an industry that has lost its presence in the North American landscape of work due to increasing import of garments made overseas, specifically in the wake of free trade agreements. These banners pose a worthwhile question. What might the millennial generation take from these banners? While they hold the radical and utopian promise of collectivity and mutual aid, the banner's messaging is very rarely explicit. While these banners are clearly marked by union, local, and trade, how might a young worker coming of age in the era of Uber, Amazon, the gig economy, and involuntary self-employment relate them to their own lives? According to StatsCan, between 1981 and 2014, union membership has fallen from 38% to 29% of Canadian workers. In the United States, only around 4% of workers aged 16 to 24 and 9% of workers aged 25 to 34 even belong to a union. What outside of an admiration for the craftspersonship of the banners might someone of a younger generation take from them, whether they be members of a general public or artists interested in the banner as a form for whom art and activism are not mutually exclusive? So this is a big question that can be unpacked through both intergenerational and youth programming at WAC and through engagement with contemporary artists interested in the power of banners to document and center marginal histories and create new texts. Both artists and the public seemed less interested in expressing their identities as workers in their own handmade banners in such programs than exploring other areas that are sort of work adjacent, including global feminist movements, anti-capitalism, and histories of labor and other social movements, where labor and other social movements intersect. Today, celebration, affiliation, and struggle are less tied up with one's working life and more the product of intersectional identities, radical heritage, and community, all conveyed through cloth and handmaking. Banner making programs at WAC have been a fascinating way to understand how diverse publics draw inspiration from labor union banners in order to honor, celebrate, and affiliate, as well as make collective declarations or demands. A series of programs connected to both all or none, as well as calendar dates, such as Labor Day and Women's History Month, gave visitors of all ages a chance to learn about and respond to the banners, as well as make ones of their own. Each example of such a program, one example of such a program happened over Labor Day weekend in 2017, where visitors were treated to a behind-the-scenes look at our banners, including several that were not up during the All or None exhibition, which happened about 6 months earlier. Visitors came to our basement storage room and were given an up-close look at the banners, after which they made their own banner with the help of 2 guest artists, TJ Charlton, who assisted visitors at a cut stencil screen printing station in the gallery, and Julia Salerno, who introduced participants to a variety of embroidery stitches to integrate into their own banner designs. The banners created came from diverse impulses and drew on traditional methods of adorning labor union banners, such as painting and embroidery. One participant named Henry, who is a unionist and a lifelong activist, he's incredible, made a screen-printed banner representing his union, a union of retired public sector workers wanting to stay connected to the labor movement, even though they've all retired. He hung the banner in the union's tent in a public park following Hamilton's Labor Day parade that year. Another participant named Nicholas created a small banner-shaped patch commemorating the women's suffrage movement, embroidering green, white, and violet color bars onto a patch that he sewed onto his denim jacket at the end of the workshop. A screen-printed and painted banner made by another participant who's not pictured in a slide, unfortunately, I forgot to take a picture, drew on union logo design to create a new one that took inspiration from an unlikely pair of influences, both her history, or the history of ironwork in her family, and superhero logos. The following November, another program brought together a group of 8 youth for a banner-making workshop, inspired by the work of storied farm worker organizer Dolores Huerta for Women's History Month. As a group, participants took inspiration from Huerta to make a banner honoring the legacy of female radicals and activists. They each honored a feminist from their own country of origin, including France, Ecuador, Pakistan, and Egypt, making a series of compositions on a canvas patch using applique, fabric dye, embroidery, and photo transfer, and then they joined them together to create a larger banner that made a collective statement. For these youth, the work of known and unsung women leaders echoed the unheralded accomplishments of women in the needle trades. Their work aimed to document, honor, and represent women who contributed to labor, social, and political struggles around the world, giving form to the inspiration that they provide for the next generation. I also wanted to, this is another modification I made late last night, I wanted to include some pictures from the banner making workshop that I ran at Struts yesterday afternoon. Thank you so much to everyone who came out. I know that there are a few people here who were there, so thank you so much. On the left, you see some notes where we collectively unpacked what our knowledge of the use of banners was before the workshop. So you'll see that sports banners and pennants were brought up as something that people could identify. Suffragette banners were of interest, and the color symbolism that is built into some of them, as well as gender identity. There was one young artist, I don't know if they're here today, but they are a banner maker themselves, and they make they make banners out of bed sheets as material, and they made a really fabulous banner yesterday. So the image on the right, you'll see how we made some of the banners. We had access to a lot of materials and processes yesterday, but a way that a lot of banner makers, specifically banner makers who make very large banners for actions today, they'll project text onto cloth in order to get letters to be, really large and really bold. So we actually used projection yesterday. And the banners you'll see, I actually brought those from Ontario. Me and my mom made them. So it was really nice to be able to give those out to people during the workshop. Some of them were made out of factory cotton, and some of them were made out of cotton canvas. Nice. So Larry made Live, Breathe, or Die, which was fantastic. And that banner is totally like an example of a pure mixed media banner. It integrates iron-on transfer, projection, and painting, and also some really fabulous trim around it. And those are some other banners in progress, using both painting and iron-on transfer. WAC has taken an interest in making explicit connections between labor archives, labor heritage, and the work of contemporary artists working with banners. Two artists in particular exemplify how artist-made banners can be positioned in conversation with artifacts from the labor movement. Winnipeg-born, Chicago-based artist Candace Fryson's work was presented alongside the garment union banners in All or None to serve as one example of how banners can be used in contemporary art to explore similar themes embodied in the historic banners: affiliation, collectivism, and unity. While some of the labor union banners represent diasporic communities of workers working together within the context of one union local, Fryson's banner honors the little-known history of a religious and linguistic minority through acts of quotation and handmaking. The cedar, the birch, and our hands up full mast behind the after is a monumental wool banner created while Fryson was completing her MFA at Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois. This work is inspired by a small community uprising in Uzbekistan in the 1930s. The following is a quote from the artist to describe this history. Being one of the only communities in the Soviet Socialist Republic to not yet collectivize, the Mennonite community of Akhmechit in Uzbekistan had settled there after a great trek from Russia in the 1880s to resist military conscription. Facing deportation from the Soviets, the migrants refused the imposed process in an extremely rare staging of an impromptu protest. While the police came to arrest and execute the village men, the women and children piled their bodies onto the trucks, singing hymns and chanting a phrase roughly translating to either or, all or none, in Russian until they left. The authorities returned the next day and honored their demand, exiling the entire village to the desert. Fryson's banner combined several texts and histories, anarchist slogans during the Russian Revolution, early Mennonite writings, and Soviet artist texts. This poetic and political text is written in Low German, which is a language associated with Mennonite religion and culture, and it's transliterated into Cyrillic. The banner references the art of quilting, as well as protection and warmth. Fryson's banner, like the Union banners, uses textile to convey a sense of collective voice, but through a Mennonite historical and cultural lens. Fryson's work with banners continues to this day, most recently this past year in an exhibition called All Is Well that has not ended at Wedge Projects in Chicago. With these banners, Fryson continues her work using the Low German dialect, which she describes as having become a kind of oral geography for a diasporic people. With this work, Fryson translates an immaterial form of production, a language that only exists orally, into physical form, representing the people behind the dialect and committing the language to the public record. Right now, WAC is in the middle of planning a really exciting solo show by Michigan-based Métis artist, activist, and scholar Dylan Miner through an ongoing project called the Wobbly Print Project. And unfortunately, I forgot to put images of the Wobbly Print Project into this presentation. So I encourage you to look Dylan up if you're interested in that particular project. There are some really great articles, specifically an article in Briar Patch Magazine, which is how I learned about the project, that can give you more details about it. So I'd encourage you to check it out. Miner has been navigating both his Métis and labor heritage through an extended engagement with a series of print blocks produced by members of the Industrial Workers of the World, which is a labor union committed to radical working class organizing and rooted in social and anarchist philosophy and practice. Dylan is slowly printing from these blocks as part of an ongoing project to give the public access to this important graphic history. This project also considers how issues of Indigenous sovereignty and the international workers of the world intersected. The IWW has always welcomed Black, Indigenous, immigrant, and women workers, when this certainly was not the case for some of the early unions. To Build Up Invincible was an artist residency Miner was part of at the Museum of Contemporary Art Detroit in 2017. For this residency, Dylan used his research, affiliation, and mentorship by wobbly artist Carlos Cortez as a jumping off point to create a series of banners and pennants. Engaging with a local and labor history of the neighborhood, Miner learned that MoCAD was actually just 3 blocks away from a former IWW union hall. After a period of engagement with the Wayne State University archives, he used fragments of text from IWW radio broadcasts to create poetic statements and new meaning on a series of striking red and black banners, the ones that you see here. Combining radical politics, local histories, and movements of Indigenous resistance, the banners quote Detroit wobbly history while referencing local animals of the Great Lakes, referencing pre-colonial, pre-nation state graphic expression. These banners served as the backdrop of a number of formal and informal public and outreach programs, including the creation of a small theater space. The creation of a small theater space inspired by IWW Street Theater, a mobile screen printing studio, and a reading room where people could learn more about local history and anti-capitalist histories. A series of banners from the following year, installed at Kalamazoo College, made of wool applique, display phrases from an oratory in resistance to the Saginaw Treaty of 1819, as well as images of plants, all of which are either medicinal or herbal. About this work, titled The Land is Always, Dylan offers, our histories and futurities are simultaneously and fundamentally linked together. This work urges against the notion that the past is something to be left behind. The only way I can think to conclude this presentation is to talk a little bit about my own experience in between the worlds of art and artifact, art and activism, and past and present, while returning to the idea of how folks today can take from the legacy of union banners and the material culture of the labor movement in an age of inequality and struggle. As a worker in a labor history museum, I have the unique privilege to live and breathe the history of social movements every day. What I've learned and accessed, whether it be people, stories, or archives has informed who I am in my work as an artist, a curator, educator, arts manager, and organizer in my local community. Right now, I'm working with a group of organizers and tenants in Hamilton to fight and raise awareness around displacement related to a massive transit infrastructure project that is leading to the demolition of numerous rental properties across 14 kilometers of the city along a major arterial road. The project has affected mostly Hamilton's working class and working poor residents who face displacement from their homes and have very few options for affordable housing in a city rife with real estate speculation. Just last week, I took part in this banner making session with some tenants and fellow organizers. We made stencils and painted a banner together. We shared food and we got to know each other better. This harkens back to the thesis of the All or None exhibition as positioning textile as a metaphor for community and care. The transcendental pleasure and power of handmaking, whether the product of a single pair of hands or several, can be a powerful force in envisioning a better future. As objects, banners have revolutionary possibility to shape collective identity and build collective power. Their continued appearance in the public sphere show that they continue to act as vehicles for collective declarations, demands, and identity, and serve as essential tools for democracy. Thanks. Yeah, thanks for those questions. They're really great. So something that comes up again and again in my presentation, and it actually is going to sound like an excuse, but in terms of Canadian examples of banners that have been created over time, there's so little scholarship, so it's really hard to speak to the Canadian context. But in terms of George Tuttle's work in particular, what I suspect is that each component would have been done by someone who was skilled in a particular area. So if you think back to George Tuttle's banners and those letters, part of my interest in banners actually comes from my kind of family history. My dad is a sign maker, my husband's a sign maker. I'm really interested in text and traditions of sign making over time. So I think that the person who would have done the lettering in particular would have been skilled in that area, and not everyone would have been. That's pretty specific. So I suspect that with those banners in particular, each person would have had a role in creating those banners, which kind of mimics the roles of unionized workers in a garment factory. So you had cutters, you had shirtwaist makers, like you had people who were doing the finishing, the sewing, the cutting. So I think that those were done the same way. To speak to your other question about silk and weaving and the materials, so the majority, like the largest panels of a lot of both Canadian and British banners were silk, but when it refers to woven, it's possible that I'll just go back to one of the images. Ooh. Oh my goodness. Right, so you see that there's a central panel. I mean, it's like a quilt really. There's a central panel and medallion, and then there's the border. So it's possible that the border is made of silk and the central panel is woven. There are different pieces of material there, so it's possible that it's a combination. But silk is, pardon the pun, a thread that runs through a lot of the banners that I've come across. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so labor union banners, as I mentioned in the presentation, banners have kind of, for the most part, given way to swag, so flags and things that can be mass produced and given out to local members. But occasionally, artists are commissioned to do more elaborate banners. In Canada, banner makers that I didn't talk about, and I'm kicking myself, I actually should have talked about them, is some of you may have heard of the Just Seeds Artist Collective, who are a collective that mainly focuses on printed matter, so posters and t-shirts and stuff like that. But there are members of this collective, and the collective has members in Canada, the United States, and Mexico. They've actually been doing some really interesting banner work for unions. So they're a group of ultimately artists, graphic artists, but they don't see their roles as artists and citizens as separate. Their role as citizens kind of takes primacy, so they have offered their services to labor unions and activists for struggles that are happening now. So they've actually, members of Just Seeds have created some really incredible banners, mostly painted banners for labor actions in the US. But in England, the banner tradition is alive and well. And a lot of contemporary banners look a lot like the Tuttle's banners. So if any of you are interested, do a few Google searches and you'll see that there are artists and to a lesser extent firms like Tuttle's who are creating amazing regalia that use a lot of the traditional techniques. Yeah.